Today on the Daily Scoop podcast from the Scoop News Group, agencies that fired 25,000 federal workers are complying with court-ordered reinstatements. And a House Democrat wants to modernize privacy law in light of the DOGE's data access. It's Wednesday, March 19th, 2025. Welcome to the Daily Scoop podcast, where you'll hear the latest news and trends facing government leaders. I'm the host of the Daily Scoop podcast, Billy Mitchell. Thanks so much for joining me. Now let's dive into the day's top headlines. Several federal agencies responsible for terminating nearly 25,000 federal probationary workers told a federal court Monday evening that they're complying with an order to reinstate those employees, giving thousands of people their jobs back for at least the time being. According to a status report and corresponding declarations filed in the U.S. District Court for the District of Maryland, 18 federal agencies and their subcomponents said they were working to reinstate their fired probationary employees following the court order. Most of those agencies said those workers would be placed on administrative leave. While the court order doesn't cover all fired probationary workers, the declarations in the case offer one of the first clear windows into the breadth of firings under President Donald Trump. Per figures listed in those declarations, the agencies initially terminated 24,813 probationary workers. Of that total, 15,499 were offered reinstatement as a direct result of the court's order. An additional 5,925 employees, at least, were previously offered reinstatement by those respective agencies before the court's order. That includes 5,714 terminated employees in the U.S. Department of Agriculture who got their jobs back for 45 days as a result of a ruling by a quasi-judicial body within the executive branch known as the Merit Systems Protection Board. The government's status report on compliance and agency declarations are the latest in a legal challenge to the firings, filed by a coalition of states led by Maryland. On March 13th, Judge James Bredar of the District Court of Maryland granted a request by the states for a temporary restraining order, which required the 18 impacted agencies to reinstate fired workers by Monday at 1 p.m. Eastern. In other news, as litigation plays out on DOGE access to individuals' sensitive data, a House lawmaker is asking civil society groups, privacy experts, government technologists, and others to inform legislation seeking to modernize the Privacy Act of 1974. Congresswoman Lori Trahan of Massachusetts, a Democrat, said in a press release that she is beginning an effort to reform the Privacy Act, which has been cited in various lawsuits against agencies over allegedly allowing unauthorized DOGE staffers to access data that could contain personally identifiable information. Trahan said in a release this week that, quote, unaccountable billionaires, inexperienced programmers, and unvetted political appointees are perpetrating the biggest government privacy scandal since Watergate. In order to begin the effort, Trahan is asking the public to respond to a series of questions, including the federal government's need to balance privacy with other priorities like reducing waste, how the government can effectively leverage privacy-enhancing technologies, the privacy risks associated with artificial intelligence, and much more. Other insights that Trahan seeks include whether the Modernize Privacy Act should address privacy concerns faced by organizations, including businesses and nonprofits, and how potential legislation could accomplish that. Trahan is also interested in disclosure requirements, including how those regarding individuals' access to and ability to amend their information could be improved, and how agencies' implementation could be modernized. Trahan argued in the request for feedback that the federal government's use of technology has dramatically evolved since the Privacy Act's enactment, which was created in response to the Watergate scandal. Since then, Congress has implemented legislation that governs the management of electronic information, like the E-Government Act of 2002. For more news at the intersection of the federal government and technology, make sure to visit fedscoop.com. The Daily Scoop podcast is available on all podcast platforms. If you've already rated the podcast on your platform of choice, thanks so much. High ratings and good reviews of the show help more people find it. The Daily Scoop podcast is a production of the Scoop News Group in Washington, D.C. Adam Butler and Carlin Fisher help put the show together, and the entire Scoop News Group team contributes. We'll be back next week with brand new episodes. Until then, I'm